Well, that's one way to end it. I don't know what I just watched, but till next season, I guess. Hey guys, remember the season finale of American Horror Story Roanoke, and let me just get into this episode because I really didn't know where we were going to go after the way last week's episode left off. I got pretty much everything I wanted with Lee being the one to survive. I didn't like the way it was done, obviously, with her being possessed. Like I said, I thought it was a cheap tactic. I thought they just did it to get people to die. But that made me think, okay, maybe this episode is something else in store. Maybe this episode will give me what I want. And the potential for this episode was really, really high. Like, I really thought we could have had a really satisfying end, and that's not what we got at all. What we get instead is basically a bunch of random segments that Ryan Murphy probably thought was a good idea if we had a longer episode, but basically was just a bunch of different random where are they nows and a bunch of random alternate endings that just really did not work at all. This was a very bizarre finale that I don't even know if I can fully call an episode because this is a very hard episode to review. I'm not going to talk about this for so long, but I mean, I would have thought American Horror Story would have learned by now that their finales are usually really bad. They really are. I mean, most of their finales, nothing happens. It's extremely repetitive. It's the same shit over and over again. And this episode might be the worst finale they've ever done, honestly. This was a really fucking weird finale, and it's not in the good kind. There was so much potential this episode had, and it wasted an entire episode on just absolute nonsense. And let's just get into it. Now, the way the episode started, I actually like, because we actually start off with the PaleyFest for My Roanoke Nightmare, which I thought this was a cool idea because we know that American Horror Story is always at the PaleyFest, so that was cool to see. And I was thinking, okay, maybe we'll get a Q&A here where we'll get to find out more about the characters, but ultimately it basically was just here so we could see all the characters again. I really didn't see a point for them to do any of this again. I mean, we got to meet some of the characters. We did get to see the guy who played Cricket, Ashley James, I think his name was, or something like that. But we got to see him one more time, and we get to see everyone from My Roanoke Nightmare one more time. Rory was there, just the entire cast was there, and it was cool to see them, but this was extremely unrealistic. The way the cast was oohing and eyeing over every single thing they said, I've never seen something quite like that. Even at a Comic Con, I don't think everyone just woos at everything anyone says. I mean, yes, it happens sometimes, but this just felt really, really artificial. It felt very unrealistic. And honestly, I was laughing at the scene. I could not take this that seriously. But the big part of the scene is that there's this woman. She's there for Lee, basically, and she's saying how bad she feels for Lee and everything. And basically, she ends up giving her flowers and saying how bad she feels for her. And then we cut to now, where somehow she's seen the second season of, the second season, Return to Roanoke, 3 Days in Hell. I don't know how she saw it. I mean, they said in the very beginning of episode 6 that this was never aired, so I have no idea how she got the footage or exactly what happened or what really happened here, because that whole thing I was very confused about. They rushed it very, very quickly. But she talks about how she felt that it was a lot more graphic and a lot more gratuitous, and how she was really upset by what it did to her and it kind of fucked her up and things like that. So I thought it was cool to see a fan reaction, but it really does get into how pointless this episode really is, which is basically a bunch of reality sketches that's basically just there to fill out the airtime and really do nothing else but just reflect on the season. So after that, we then cut to some show called Cracked, and right off the bat, I was very thrown off because I got the impression that this entire episode was going to be an interview between Lana Winters and, Lee Harris. And if that was this entire episode, it could have been a really compelling hour of TV. We'll get into that, but they really could have done a lot with that, and they completely wasted it. They did this show called Cracked, and I did not give a shit what was going on in this. I mean, it's supposed to be like sort of like a where are they now, celebrities who did some really bad things and who are going through a lot of shit and what happened to them, but we essentially get kind of like a People versus OJ here, which I get what Ryan Murphy was trying to do. He was definitely trying to do a People versus OJ homage, but it did not work at all. Really, this did not work. We see they're talking about, who Lee is and how controversial of a person she is, and how I guess her first when she was on trial for murder, she was actually acquitted, but the judge, found another way to get her on the panel, to get her another trial because he felt that she should be acquitted for Mason's death since she confessed to Mason's death. Obviously, they got held, they got held of the tapes and everything, and by doing so, they did hear her say that she had confessed to Mason's death. And here is where we get probably the weirdest part of this episode, which is that most of this episode is about the relationship between Lee and Flora, which, yes, it works. I mean, definitely it's somewhat consistent, but none of this season has really been about that. I don't think any of this season has really been about Lee and Flora. It's been about Lee, definitely. I think Lee has been a major part of it, and Flora has kind of been, but she's really been an afterthought. It's always been, oh, I'm doing this for Flora. Oh, I care about Flora. It's really only been there to give Lee character development and to give us something to care about. And the way they focus on Lee and Flora, I just thought was really arbitrary and really just seemed like they just randomly did this to give Lee something to do and give us some sort of story to follow. And the story we follow here is absolutely ridiculous. We see Flora, they literally talk to Flora because she's, I guess, a witness of what happened with Lee, and, she now has the knowledge that Lee was Mason's killer, and she wants nothing to do with Lee. She tells Lee that the only reason she came to Roanoke was because of Priscilla, and she wants to go back there for Priscilla. She wants nothing to do with Lee. She tells them that, she had a lot more fun with Priscilla than, she felt a lot more safe with Priscilla than when she was with Lee. She confesses that Lee did in fact murder Mason, that she in fact did see it, which I thought this was interesting to find out that she did see Lee murder Mason. But again, the whole reenactment footage, I mean, we're past that. We're past that. We've seen that in the first 5 episodes. We don't need to see this reenactment footage. I don't know why they showed this reenactment footage. We can tell what happened. You don't need to put it in our face. I know that she beat him over the head with a rock. I'm not stupid, okay? You don't need to show me this. But either way, she confesses that Lee did in fact, kill Mason, and basically this does get Lee, you don't know if she's going to go to jail. We see a thing where I thought she went to jail, but we don't know if she went to jail. But either way, the jury declares her not guilty, mainly because of the fact that it seems completely made up. And I get why they didn't declare her guilty, because it seemed made up and it didn't seem real, and obviously they didn't actually see it happen, so they can't, base a case on some sort of ghost mystery that they don't actually know if it was real, so therefore Lee is, in fact, let off guilty. So that's the end of the crack segment, which was completely unnecessary. We easily could have just seen maybe a 5-minute scene with Lee in trial. We did not need this whole cracked thing that was going on. It completely deviated from the rest of the episode and really sets us up for how much of a clusterfuck of an episode this ends up becoming. Then we get to what is by far the best part of this episode, which is everything we've been waiting for between Lana Winters and Lee Harris. The best part of this episode is showing how similar these two are, the experience that they had, what they shared together. That was the thing that I was most looking forward to. Lee and Lana are two very similar people. They've gone through very similar backgrounds. They've gone through stories that people really don't believe, and they've been deemed insane. And obviously they've turned out very different, but seeing Lee and seeing Lana was probably the most compelling stuff in this episode, because right off the bat, Lee's there, you don't know why she's there, Lana's trying to question her and everything, and I thought I did not watch Asylum. Of course, I did not watch Asylum. I've told you guys this before. I know how Asylum ends. I know they talked about how Asylum ends in this episode. I've known this for a while. I've just never been able to binge Asylum. I was going to do it this weekend. I never got a chance to. And it really didn't matter because Lana was in this episode for maybe at most like 8 minutes. There really was not much of her in this episode. I get why she was here, obviously, because they needed someone to interview her, and obviously because Ryan Murphy loves Sarah Paulson, but also because, again, Lee went to Lana specifically because of what she's been through, and Lee talks about that's why she's there. She went there because of what she's been through and everything, and how she's really there for Flora. She wants to tell Flora that she loves her and how much she cares about her. And then we get to this whole thing where Lana tells Lee straight up, look, if you're hiding Flora again, you need to let everyone know. You need to tell the authorities. And it was just so much great tension here. You don't know if Lee actually has kidnapped Flora again. You don't know if Lee actually is insane, or if maybe she's doing drugs again. I mean, there's so many places they could have gone with this. And instead, they decide to randomly get Lot Polk to come into the room, shoot up most of the staff, and then hit Lana with the gun when she tries to get him to stop, because obviously he feels really, he Once he has revenge on Lee for what she did to the rest of his family. And this again just felt like completely like an afterthought. I don't know why we need the rest of the Polk family here. We're done with this part of the story. We don't need La Polk in there. It just didn't feel satisfying at all. It felt like they just put him in there to just have some sort of tension in the episode, and it was completely unnecessary. But basically he ends up, going to Lee. He's about to shoot her. The entire camera crew, someone shoots them. We have no idea who it is, and we don't know if Lana survived. But before this can end, it turns to black, and I thought after this is when the curtain was going to be pulled back. I thought that we were going to get some huge reveal as to who the mastermind was behind all this, but instead it goes in this really weird direction. There was so much potential for this scene. There was so much they could have done with Lana and Lee, and at most we got was maybe 6 minutes. I mean, this was very, very underwhelming. I wanted so much more from this. You get Sarah Paulson back as Lana Winters, arguably the best character in this entire show. That's what I hear from most people. And you completely waste her. I mean, she was wasted in this episode. She had nothing to do. Except talk to Lee, and they didn't really even get into the interesting stuff. Like, they could have easily get into the fact that, Lana carries a gun, and the fact that Lana carries a gun, she could have easily shot Lee. I thought that's what was going to happen. I thought that Lee was going to get to Lana to the point where Lana was going to shoot her because she was still going to be possessed, which I thought that Lee was still going to be possessed. I thought that's what the big reveal was going to be at the end of this episode. But instead, we cut to black, and then we get to what is by far the worst part of this entire episode. So after this, I was expecting, like I said, for them to pull the curtain back and for the rest of the episode to be like American Horror Story. But again, instead, we get some really stupid shit called Ghost Chasers. This was just stupid, honestly. All this is a complete rehash of the entire season. There is no reason for this Ghost Chaser shit to happen. The only reason it was here is because they need to fill airtime and they didn't know what to do. Basically, there are these two guys. It's kind of like a ghost hunter show where I guess they try to find urban myths and everything. For some reason, they're going to the house during the blood moon of all reasons, because, nothing bad's going to happen if they go to the fucking blood moon and get hurt or something. But they go to the House of the Blood Moon, and they completely they're so dumb here. They're trying to set up the cameras. They get the actor who played Cricket to come back, which it was cool to see Leslie Jones again. I like seeing him, but they didn't really get into the whole idea of why he didn't really want me back. It's just, oh, Sydney didn't want me back. They didn't really get into much with his character. There really was no reason to bring him back, and the only reason they brought him back really was just to kill him, which we'll get into. But basically, Lee is in fact at the house we see. I thought that she was going to end up being a ghost, but she's not. She's looking for Flora because she knows that Flora has gone back to the house, which this was a cool way of telling that story, but it was so half-assed because it focused on this ghost chaser shit, and the ghost chasers completely completely just ignore Lee when she's telling me, leave, leave, leave. Just leave. Seriously, leave. There's no reason for you to stay there. I get that it's your job. I get that it's a show. I get this is stuff you're interested in, but just leave. I mean, this is someone who has been through this. She's been in the Roanoke house. Honestly, I believe her. I really would. If I was in that Roanoke house and I knew it was the blood moon, I would believe her. I would leave. I would. I would not want to stay when there are ghosts there. I don't think anyone with common sense would want to do that. And I don't know if these two are just so shallow and that they've made so many shows. I mean, Ghost Hunters, I've never seen that show. I heard it's a fun show. That show is mainly good because of the fact that it is, myths and things like that, and you don't know if it's actually is real. This is something completely different. I mean, this is a completely different situation where they're running through the house, they're acting like idiots, and obviously, they do end up getting killed by the blood moon. Police are there. For some reason, the police have no idea what's going on either. When they even see the moon in the sky, they see it's a blood moon, and yet they get stabbed as well. So Lee is now in the house with Flora. They're reunited. We don't really know what's going to happen there. This entire part of the episode was so unnecessary. I have no idea why they did this Ghost Chaser shit. I was not into this at all. I thought it just completely deviated from the rest of the episode. There really was no reason for this to be in here, and it was really only here, I think, like I said, to fill up airtime. There was no reason to do that. And then we get to what is probably the worst ending the show has ever given us. Now, I will admit, the way this last scene was done, I thought was pretty cool, because we start off with this news report. Basically, the Roanoke house is now under siege, basically, which it's about time it's under siege. I mean, how did no one want to investigate this before? How did no one think that, oh, maybe we should just keep people away from this house. Like, why all of a sudden is it under siege? Why do people want to keep going back to this house if they hear terrible things? I mean, yes, I get that we have, curiosity, and yes, curiosity did kill the cat, but at the same time, why the fuck would you want to go back to this house? It just didn't make any sense to me as to why someone with common sense would want to do that. That made no sense whatsoever. But for some reason, they do want to go back to the house. We see like a news report. I did like the scene with Lana talking about how similar her and Lee were. I thought that was a pretty good scene the way it was done. But again, there wasn't really any reason for that to be there except for the fact that, oh, we just saw Lana Winters again. It was a good scene. I liked it. I just wanted more of it in this episode because then I would have actually had something to talk about, which if you guys can tell, I have like nothing to talk about in this episode. We do get to see the real actor that played Elias, which I thought was cool because that was the only actor we didn't see yet. His name is William Van Henderson. He's kind of like a newscaster, so I thought that was kind of cool that we saw him very briefly. And then finally, we cut to the real American Horror Story. Why? Because there's no more newscast to tell. All the stories about Roanoke have been told. All of the documentaries that have been shown about this house we've seen. Now it is time to actually see the real American Horror Story, which is literally 7 minutes long, which is so sad. The way this was done was cool. I thought it was kind of cool the way they finally did an actual American Horror Story. Like, we've seen all the footage. We've seen the documentary. We've seen the raw footage. We've seen, the fucking ghost chaser shit. We've seen everything involving these characters. Now we get to see the actual show play out. And this last scene is one of the most confusing and head-scratching scenes of this entire show. I don't understand anything that happened in this final scene. I don't understand why they chose to end this way. And I don't know why Ryan Murphy thinks this is a good ending, because it's a horrible ending, really. We see Flora and Lee. They're both in the house together. And I thought this could have been a sweet ending. Maybe these two finally reconnect. Lee's trying to reconnect with Flora. For some reason, Flora is so preoccupied on Priscilla. It's all Priscilla, Priscilla, Priscilla. And I don't know why she's so focused on Priscilla. Again, we have not heard about Priscilla since episode 5. Priscilla's not been a thing since episode 5. I don't know why she was such a big deal in this episode. But she keeps going on about Priscilla, how she needs to protect Priscilla, how Priscilla saved her, and how she felt safe with Lee. Lee to her is kind of looking like a monster, we see. So Lee decides to come with this really bullshit idea that in order to, keep Flora safe, because obviously she does want to keep her daughter safe, she's going to be Priscilla's mother, and she's going to sacrifice herself, and the way she's going to do that is she's going to blow up the house in order to save Priscilla and protect her and basically become the new butcher, and that saves Flora. So let me just get back to that. If you guys are paying attention, Flora is the last survivor in this show. Yes, that is how uneventful this episode really was. Flora has never been a major character. Flora has always been an afterthought. Yes, she's been a part of Lee. Yes, she's been the thing that's most important to Lee. But we never really got to focus on Flora and Lee. So this felt completely unnecessary. I don't know why we went in this direction at all. But the house is blown up. No one's going to go back there. Lee is now the new ghost in the house. She's a ghost and everything. She's looking after Priscilla. She's gonna be Priscilla's mother. Flora finally gets to go away. I would check myself in a mental institution after that. Are you kidding me? Like, my fucking mom just said that she was gonna kill herself to protect this ghost girl. I mean, I would get the fuck out of there. I don't know about Flora, but I would get the fuck out of there. I'm glad she got out of there, but I would get out of there and go to like a mental institution because I don't know if I could deal with that shit. She's gonna go live with like her grandparents or something. But we see at the very end of the episode, we see the butcher and all of them. They're approaching the house and they realize that there's no reason to continue the blood moon because no one, I guess, is gonna come back to the house anymore. And that's how we end. We see the Roanoke screen, and that's how this entire thing ends. And it was probably the most bizarre ending we've ever had in this show. It is one of the most head-scratching endings ever, and completely wasted any sort of resolution or conclusion we could have had for the season. Any sort of twist the season could have had was instead we were giving complete bullshit. We were giving complete unnecessary documentaries that we really did not needed, and completely made this entire season feel like a waste. So yeah, really not a good finale. I was honestly really disappointed. I was hoping that maybe we get some really good resolution. I was hoping there'd be some sort of big reveal, especially when we cut to the real American Horror Story. I thought, okay, this is when we're really going to realize what's going on. See, what I thought we were leading to is that all of this was in Lee's head. That's what I thought. I thought all this was going to be in Lee and Flora's head, that they constructed all this, that they're just crazy, that they're the ones that kill everyone. That's what I thought was really going to happen, that Lee was in fact a monster. She concocted all this, and I thought that's really what we were really getting to. But no, instead this ended up being a tale of mother and daughter, but it was so half-assed because of all of the documentary shit. And that's my problem with this season. Let me just get into the season overall, because you guys know I started off really, really liking this season, and then after last week I started not giving a shit, and I'll tell you guys why. Because while I thought we had some truly great stuff this season, episodes 6 and 7 are absolute perfection. I think everything about those episodes are great. They're some of the best we've had in American Horror Story. I loved everything about them. Episode 8, I think, is right up there. Those 3 episodes are great. The rest of the episodes this season felt very exposition heavy, very half-assed, and just felt like they were there to see either people get killed, have things explained, or just get to see certain actors. And the season in general didn't really feel like they had a clear direction. I felt like in the beginning they did when they had the documentary. They definitely had a clear direction of where we were going with that. But it never really focused on the characters. It focused way too much on how do we kill off this character, or how do we raise the stakes here. Now, let me just say, this is definitely the most suspenseful season of American Horror Story I've seen. I mean, this season was truly chilling. This season was truly scary, and it really did get to me in a way American Horror Story hasn't before. I mean, definitely when these characters died, I really felt for them. This is the most graphic season they've done. A lot of the season, though, was very style over substance, and I definitely will say that. A lot of people said Hotel was, and I would disagree. I think Hotel had much more realized characters in this show. The characters in the show were very well realized, but they didn't really go beyond what we saw when we were first introduced to them. Lee stayed the drunk, the one that had a problem, who was an unhinged mother. We never really got to get into her more than that, that she was an unhinged mother. I thought we were going to get a lot more into her character, but we never really did. There never was really anything that great about her besides what we saw in that first episode, and I was hoping we get more of their character, and we just didn't. Matt and Shelby, they were boring as hell, honestly. Looking back, Matt and Shelby were very boring. There's so much stuff that is unexplained with Matt, especially his connection with Skathatch. That was never explained. So half-assed. There was so much potential there, and why give Lady Gaga this great role and you barely use her? I have no idea why Ryan Murphy decided to give Lady Gaga, of all people, this role, who was one of the stars of last season, one of the biggest parts of last season, one of the most, someone who got the most praise last season. Hell, she won an Emmy for crying out loud, and he gives her 0 to nothing to do. I don't understand why we didn't explore Matt and Skathatch more. Matt should have been the sole survivor, and we could have gotten into the relationship more, and that would have been very interesting. Shelby was boring. We never got into her character that much, and most of the characters we just didn't really get into. Rory was wasted. Sydney was definitely wasted. I feel like Sydney, we had some great stuff with him in episode 6 and episode 7 as well, but after that, he was completely wasted. He was very much an afterthought, and they could have done some really cool stuff with his character. They would have kept him alive till maybe episode 9, and they just did not want to do it. I don't know why they didn't keep Sydney around. They killed him off way too early. Agnes is probably the most well-realized character in this entire show. I think that character was just so well done, the way they fleshed her out. I thought she really was great. Audrey is one of Sarah Paulson's worst characters. I definitely will say that. There was, really nothing to her. Dominic, Cuba Gooding Jr. I love Cuba Gooding Jr., but almost every character in this show ended up being a shell of what they really were. There was so much potential they could have done with these characters. There was so much more they could have done with them, and instead, they chose to focus on how do we kill off these characters instead of how do we further develop these characters. And that is a problem that I think Ryan Murphy has a lot, and I get that he was trying to do something a little more simplistic. The problem was, he didn't really give himself much to work with. He really didn't. I mean, besides the fact that we had these characters, we were introduced to characters, and then they were killed off very quickly, and we just didn't really get the time to really care about them, and really get into their characters, and really get us to dissect them. And I thought that they were really going to take their time with things, and they just didn't really get to do that. And I think the biggest problem is not because we did a 10-episode season, it's because of how short the episodes really were. If this 10-episode season had episodes that were maybe 70 minutes long, hell, even 80 minutes long, this season could have really, really benefited than that. I think they really could have done a lot more there. I think we could have had a lot more interesting of a season, and that's one of the reasons why Fargo was so good, because Fargo always knew when to be long, when to be short. Ryan Murphy does not know what to do with American Horror Story. I'm going to say that right now. This season, I think he had a good idea, but it just really did not work. I mean, this could work as a movie, but as a TV series, this did not work in the way I wanted to, and I was quite disappointed, I have to say. Now, there were some really great things this season. I think this is probably one of the most subdued seasons of American Horror Story we've had. This was a very subdued season. It really was never that cheesy. I mean, the ending definitely was kind of cheesy. I will definitely say that. And the last two episodes were pretty cheesy, and as a whole, definitely there were some cheesy moments. But this is probably the most real season we've had, and that's because of the paranormal documentary, the way that that was done. This felt very real. This felt like this very much could happen. In fact, I think there probably are stories that this has happened. If I heard correctly, Ryan Murphy did get this based on a true story. So not based on a true story, but like he heard about this. I definitely think that this is something that could happen. I think that concept was very well done. I think the scares are really good, and I think what we got with the characters, we had some truly great scenes. Like, I still think the best scene in this entire season is either Agnes confessing, why she admired the butcher so much and what she loved from the butcher. That was great. Or Lee confessing that she murdered Mason. Those small scenes, what they did with the characters, really showed what this season could have been. This could have been a much more character focused season if he put a little bit more emphasis into them and maybe he gave them more to do. Then I would have walked away and said, okay, that was a very satisfying season. But because of how one note and stereotypical, not stereotypical, but because of how one note and cliche these characters end up being and just not really given a lot to do and were just killed off immediately, I really am going to forget this season very quickly. I found this to be a very forgettable season. I really wanted to love it, but in general, there were just a lot of things that very much let me down with this season. Now, like I said, there are some very good things about it that I definitely really did enjoy. But looking back, this was kind of a disappointing season. There are great episodes in there. There were some really good things about it, but in general, I really was not as big as a fan as I wanted to be. It's certainly not as bad as Freak Show because all the characters were likable. I did never hated any characters. I understood why characters did what they had to do, but they just didn't really focus on them. They focused more on how do we, create the next threat? How do we get the next villain? How do we get the next character in danger? They didn't really focus on the characters overall. The Lee Shelby conflict, they never really got to do. I mean, that was something that I was so interested in seeing. Lee versus Shelby, it just seems so interesting seeing these two butting heads, and we never really got to do much of that. There were a couple things where, yeah, when Matt died, obviously Lee was really pissed at Shelby, or in the beginning with Lee and Shelby, but we never really got to get into that, and I think that's something that this season was really missing. It was just really missing, I think, that character connection that the other seasons had. And but really, the biggest problem with this season isn't the episode lengths or the way the episodes were done or the way the characters were done. It's all Ryan Murphy. Honestly, Ryan Murphy, you're very good at what you do, but this season, like I said, I don't really think you had a very clear vision of where you want to go, especially the fact that the season was sworn in secrecy. There really wasn't many secrets to keep. I mean, there really wasn't anything that shocking that happened this season. The big twist that happened in episode 6, it was big, but it just really didn't boil down to anything. It wasn't really that surprising. That was the direction they went in, and it wasn't the mindfuck that we all thought it was going to be. Especially the fact that we waited so long for a season. This was definitely different, but honestly, I don't think it was different enough. I think it was very much, he liked the documentary style, he tried it, but there just never felt clearly like an American Horror Story season. Always felt like the season was just beginning, and I'm not gonna lie, that's how the season felt to me all season long. I'm always like, okay, the next episode, that's gonna be when the season really starts. The next like episode 6, I'm like, okay, that's gonna be the new start season. Then episode 7, I'm like, all right, let's go. Episode 8 was really good. But after, after episode 7, I started to feel like I wasn't liking this as much, and it just felt so half-assed. It felt very underwritten. It felt like there was just a lot more he wanted to do with it, and it's mainly because of the fact that Ryan Murphy said, oh, Finn Wittrock has this great character, only use him in 2 episodes. Oh, Evan Peters is so funny this season, only used him in 1 episode. Oh, Lady Gaga is such a scary character. She was in maybe a quarter of an episode. I mean, these characters he talked about were barely used. He clearly, I don't know what he was doing, if he was on drugs or something. I'm not going to say that he was on drugs, but The fact that he thought that these characters were well utilized is ridiculous. They're not well utilized at all. They were barely used, and that really did make that really did due in part to how disappointing of a season this really was in terms of characters. Look, when it comes down to it, I'm not gonna say the season was bad because I don't think this was a bad season. I don't think it was an okay season. It was a good season. I enjoyed it overall. There definitely were some good things about it, but in general, it was quite disappointing. But in the end, I am gonna give American Horror Story Roanoke as a season a 3.5 to 5 or a B minus. Definitely had some great ideas in there. Definitely had some interesting characters. Just didn't really know what to do with them after a certain point, especially I think after episode 8 when they killed off most of the characters. They really didn't know where to go from there. They were put in this corner that they really couldn't have fixed, and I think it really was a detriment to the rest of the series. And unfortunately, I really want to love the season. I think it's cool they did something different, but I really am looking back at the season, and most of the season, I'm really looking forward to seeing them go back to basics next season because this really was a cool idea, just in theory didn't work as well as it could have. But that's my review of American Horror Story Roanoke. Let me know what you guys thought of this season overall. I can't believe the season is over. 10 episodes, I think, was the right length for the season. I think it worked. Like I said, I just think they could have made the episodes a lot longer, and I would have been a lot more impressed with the season. So many characters that were wasted. There was just so much potential that was there, and it just wasn't really delivered in the way I wanted it to be. But this was definitely one of the stronger seasons of the bunch. I definitely will say that. But then there were some things that weren't as strong. But that's my review. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought of this season overall. Loved your thoughts on it. Did you like the finale? Like I said, I know I didn't really review the finale that much. There's not really much to talk about. It didn't really feel like a finale. It felt like a random segments of a TV show. It didn't really feel like a finale to me at all. But that's my review. Definitely not a very good way to end the season. I was hoping that I would come out of the season, I would say, okay, that was very satisfying. I understood why they did what they did, but they never really gave me that big reveal that I wanted, and I want a big reveal. They never really did that, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for the season of You're the Worst, because You're the Worst also ended tonight, and I definitely have a lot to say about that. Definitely more to say about that than American Horror Story Roanoke. Thank you guys for watching all season. Definitely looking forward to next season, American Horror Story, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.